Hi all. Today I will show you a very interesting trap against the Sicilian defense. I advise you to learn this trap. And you can win a lot of your games with this trap. And so we play for white. We make the first move with the king's pawn on e4. Your opponent is playing the Sicilian. He puts the pawn on c5. What we do next here deduce according to the bishop theory on c4. Further, according to theory, your opponent will always put a pawn on d6. Put your knight on f3. He will of course put his knight on f6 attacking our e4 pawn. You do not defend her but castling. He will of course take our pawn on e4. What we do next is we put the queen's pawn on d4. In theory your opponent will take our pawn anyway. He takes it with a pawn and we take the pawn on d4 with our queen. Our queen attacks the knight on e4. Of course no one will defend the horse. Let's say a pawn. It is dangerous to open the king. Therefore your opponent is guaranteed to make the strongest move. He will simply move the knight back to its original place on f6. I think you agree with me. What are we doing next? We make one move with which we win this game. Which one? I think you do not guess that such a move can be made. We simply transfer the knight to e5. Thus what are the options for our adversary? Well, let's consider this most natural option. Since our knight and our bishop are attacking the f7 pawn, your opponent for example will advance the king's pawn to e6. To cover the bishop attack on f7. Then if the pawn goes to e6 you will transfer the bishop to b5. Make check. He will cover himself with a horse, you will take a horse. He is a pawn and you check with the bishop and take the rook. This is the strongest variation for black in which you win the rook. What can happen next if it is blitz? Your opponent can make such a move. He can, let's say, attack the queen with a knight and become a knight on c6. Then you just put the bishop on f7, check and checkmate. The same if he admits the pawn will also advance the bishop, check and checkmate. These are the options that can occur. But now you are thinking why I am telling all this if you can take our knight with a pawn. Well, that's the point. That is, I showed it the options if your opponent for example does not take the knight with a pawn. Even then you either take the rook or checkmate. If the enemy takes the knight with a pawn in the same way as we do next, we simply capture the pawn on f7 with the bishop and check the black king. The black king's only possible move is to capture our bishop on f7. So he will do, there is no other move. And what we have achieved by this, we have achieved that the king has ceased to defend the queen. And we take the black queen with the queen. In this way, with the help of the knight to e5, we very easily defeated the Sicilian defense. I think that everything is very simple here. The beginning of the debut was played out according to theory. Therefore be sure to study each move, and here after the e5 move the knight to e5. Everything is very clear. That is, if let's say again you covered yourself with a pawn, you transferred the bishop to b5, check. See there, most likely he will be covered by a horse. There is already an exchange of knight for knight. Then take the pawn and take the rook. Checkmate is very simple with the bishop. And if he nevertheless takes your knight with a pawn, then you, as I have shown here, take the queen. I think this is a very good trap. I use this trap very often. The bottom line is that even the moves can be slightly different, but if you understand the structure of the trap you can always apply it. A similar trap is not only found in the Sicilian defense. Thus, for example, the queen can be captured in another opening. If you are interested in which right, I will answer. All, if you like this trap, be sure to learn it. Take the board and work it 20 times. You will remember it well, remember the structure, and you will have such a weapon of yours against the Sicilian. All, if you liked it, please subscribe to the channel. I will tell you many more chess combinations and traps. All for now, play chess and remember, every chess master was once a beginner.